Thank you very much for the testimony. I'm going to defer my time, and the order, therefore, is going to be Senator Dick Durbin. We're going to follow by the ranking member, Tom Cotton. Then we're going to follow that by Senator Padilla, then the Republican whip, and my colleague, John Cornyn, will follow. I will now turn to Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Angelos, you're not a witness. You're a legend. We have been talking about you for years, even while you were in jail. And the reason, of course, is one of the prosecutors is now a United States Senator, Mike Lee. And he told your story over and over again to remind us that what seems like thoughtful, meaningful sentencing can go spin completely out of control. And there you sat with a 55-year sentence. I can't tell you how many times we argued your case in this committee in constructing different approaches to sentencing. And I can recall that when I passed the measure that lowered the disparity between crack and powder cocaine from 100 to 18, your case was still brought up, though you weren't involved necessarily in any aspect of that. But it was to show just what happens when you go to 100 to 1 to get tough and end the war on drugs. You fill up the prisons, usually with the poorest people on earth, and the net result is a resentment and nullification when it comes time to pick a jury. Well, we went through all those arguments over the years, and we finally came to the conclusion that we could do something on a bipartisan basis, and we did. Again, your name was referred to time and time again on the First Step Act. We passed that bill, bipartisan bill, Grassley, Durbin, Durbin, Grassley, depending on who was on top at the time, and we sent it to President Trump, who signed it into law, realizing that sentencing disparities had to be addressed directly and give more discretion to judges to inject the real world into these guidelines that we were sending out there. So I feel like I've known you a long time, and I thank you for being here today. You heard the testimony from Mr. Cook that the application of the laws on marijuana are not racially bigoted, not racially biased. Did you see a different world?
Absolutely. Nearly everyone I met in prison incarcerated for cannabis were Black and Latino.
That's my impression too, and the statistics back you up. Dr. Burnett, I said at one point when they asked me something that I thought was just logical. Would you be in favor of using cannabis for medical purposes? I thought, it's a chemical. If a doctor thinks it's going to help you, how can I judge that it wouldn't? So I said yes. And then there came a time when they started opening up marijuana health clinics in my hometown. And they invited me to come into one and see how it worked. You ever been to one?
Of course.
So here's what I saw. They set me down at a table with the Vitruvian Man. You know what that is?
Yes, I do.
Leonardo da Vinci.
He hangs on my wall at my house.
And there were arrows pointed to different parts of your body. And next to those arrows it said, migraine headache, sore throat, lack of hearing, muscle pain. And at the end it said, certain XYZ 14, XYZ 18. I said, what is this? If you got a problem with migraines, you need this kind of marijuana. And if you got a problem with sore throat, you need this kind of marijuana. And I thought to myself, really? How do you know that? And I still ask that question. How does anybody know that? And I said, have there been studies by NIH or other agencies? Nope, but they won't touch it. It's a Schedule I narcotic. I said, well, where did this information come from? China, Europe, you name it, but it never was the United States. So I became kind of skeptical. This man who was for medical marijuana, when he looked at the Vitruvian Man, said, I think they're making this up. These people standing next to me in white coats aren't medical professionals, they're salesmen. Right. Women. So now we have federal agencies that are talking for the first time about doing actual research to see if there is a positive thing that marijuana can be used for. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that there is significant potential within the cannabis plan. I think Senator Cotton highlighted a lot of the points there relative to the pharmaceutical components of the plant, and if we were able to free universities, particularly from the fear of losing their federal funding, then they would be able to conduct these research studies, right? That's, in my experience, largely when we're trying to do these sort of studies in the various universities that I've been a part of, there is pushback through the IRB around whether or not we should do this research for fear of losing federal funding. And so if we remove cannabis from the schedule, it will allow the various NIH institutes to be able to participate.
And my obvious question is, why wouldn't we investigate it, research it, find out one way or the other whether it works, it doesn't work. What about my concern I expressed early on about keeping this out of the hands of kids? Now, we're naive to believe we'd keep it out of the hands of all kids, but shouldn't we make a conscious effort to make sure the product is not sold to children?
Absolutely. I think that if we, part of the problem with us being able to engage in robust public health discussion is that we can't, because cannabis is prohibited. So it prevents us from being able to create responsible public health education campaigns around responsible use. If you look at the state of Colorado, once they changed the laws, their public health department was able to create a whole campaign about how you responsibly use cannabis. And when you looked at their state level data, the number of youth who were using cannabis actually, for the first couple of years, fell and then ultimately kind of remained flat.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.